Hello and welcome to the channel. I hope you're all well, doing some fishing. During this preamble I'll be referring to some British reservoirs, but this fly is not an original tying by me. It's a buzzer used by lots of anglers, and I first tied it for fishing at Rutland Reservoir about 25 years ago, and in my mind I've always called it the Rutland Buzzer. The title to the video is a little bit cryptic, but I was fishing a team qualifier at Chew, and my boat partner and I, along with many others, had not had a particularly successful day. We had ventured off to a part of the reservoir where there were not many boats, in the hope that the quieter areas would be to our benefit, and we changed drifts and locations throughout the day, with my boat partner having 4 fish and I had 3. With an hour or so to go, we noticed quite a few boats had congregated in herons, so we decided to motor over and see what was going on. There's very little wind, which was coming off the road, and so the drifts were really slow coming out of the bay. So slow that we couldn't motor in behind, so decided to set the drogue halfway and fish out of the bay. I set up a bung, and on the point I tied a Rutland buzzer. It didn't take long for me to net a fish, and shortly afterwards I hooked another. My boat partner was, let's say, perplexed, especially as there weren't many fish being caught and not a lot of time left. After I dispatched the second trout, I swung my leader around so that he could have a look at the fly. I'm nice like that. But unbeknownst to me, my boat partner had another team member not far away, and he turned and shouted, "Crisp packet with a tuft." My boat partner quickly tied on what he thought was a replica, but didn't have another fish. I had one more before we had to motor back to the lodge. I should explain that crisps are what the United States call chips, and in the UK a particular brand of chicken flavoured crisps at the time had orange foil packaging, and this was being used as cheeks for buzzers. Tuft was obviously the breathers. I've also had great success with this on Gratham and at Hanningfield under the bung, but that is not to say that it can't be fished very successfully, just letting it drift around on a floating line or a slow retrieve on a slow intermediate line. So let's get into the tying. In the vise I have a size 10 nymph hook, and I'll be tying with 6/0 black thread. Right, I'm just going to tie on the thread and trim up the excess. Now I'm going to tie in the breathers first, and this is a material that I've used for over 25 years. It's I think probably some sort of dacron. It's a twisted dacron, and you don't need a lot of it, so I'll just snip a piece off. And I'm going to wet it because it's easier to tie that way. And I'm just going to tie that in on top as the breather, and try and leave a little bit of space at the front there for tying in at the end. And I'm going to trim up the excess. And wind down to the rear of the fly and around the bend. Right, and here is where we're going to tie in the principal material, which is a stripped peacock quill. Now, whether you tie this in open spaces or touching turns is entirely up to you, but I'm going to tie it in with touching turns. So I'm just going to tie it in at the rear and wind up the hook, tying in the excess quill as well, and trim off the excess. Now I'm just going to thicken it up a little bit closer to the thorax area. Right, now before I wind this on, I'm just going to put a little bit of glue onto the thread, try and hold the quill in place. And wind on the quill. Now I'm going to do it in touching turns, as I said, because that's how I've always done it. I don't think it really matters if you miss a turn or there's a bit of a gap, but just try and do it as I've described. It's obviously becoming a little more difficult as I get to the end of the quill. And tie off the quill. And trim up the excess. And tie it down and build up a nice head to the buzzer, or the chironomid, however you wish to call it. Now for the wing buds, I'm going to use some orange goose bite. So I'll just snip off a couple of bites. And remember, when you're tying these in, you want the convex side of the bite showing on the outside. So I'll just tie this one in. And tie in the second bite. And bind down the bites. And continue building up the head. Right, bring round the bite on this side. Tie it down. Bring round the bite on the other side. Tie that down. Right, now whether you tear off the bites or trim the bites is entirely up to you. I'm going to trim them because I've often had problems with them pulling out when I've tried to break them off. So I'll just trim those up. And tie them down. And put a wrap underneath the breather, like so, and tie off the fly. And trim it up. Right, now I didn't have the benefit of UV varnish 25 years ago. I used just ordinary varnish. Just put a coat on. And give that a zap. and give it another coat. Now it's important that you give this a couple of good coats, and if you're using ordinary varnish, certainly 2 or 3 coats. I'll show you the importance of giving it a good coat of varnish in just a moment. Give that another zap. And trim up the breather. Now, how long you want the breathers, entirely up to you, but I don't think you need them too long. Something like that. And the fly is finished. Now, this is one of my originals from many moons ago. As you can see, it's got still got a barb on the hook, because in those days it was barbed hooks. So you can see almost identical. Now, I said about giving it plenty of coats of varnish. This is what happens after 3 or 4 fish. I found this in the box. I obviously put this in the box and quickly tied on another one. In fact, it's still got a little bit of UV on there, not UV, a little bit of fluorocarbon in the hole there. But that's what happens after 3 or 4 fish if you haven't given it a good coat. It's worth tying a few up. Now, how would I fish it? Now, I would fish it on the bung, and the bung can be whatever type of bung you want it to be. I would have this on the point, and then another buzzer a little bit further up, and then maybe a dielbach on the top. Now, in those days, only 4 points were allowed. Now, I believe it's 5 points, which incorporates a double, if you so wish, on the point, and 3 other flies. Now, if I was using 5 points, I would probably put on a size 12 Rutland buzzer up from the point fly. Now, as far as the bung is concerned, I used to tie that on quite a long dropper. And the reason for that was to give me extra length. Now, when you're fishing in a boat, you're not allowed to stand up, apart from getting into the boat and getting out of the boat, but you can stand up to net a fish. So you're fishing with, let's say, a 10-foot rod, and you're standing up. So you're looking at possibly 12 to 13 feet of leader, of full leader. Now, if you have the bung on a longer dropper, then you're able to bring that dropper through the top eye until you get to the bung. Now, that might only give you another 6 inches, but it's another 6 inches of depth that you can fish the buzzers on. So there you go, the so-called Rutland buzzer, as I call it. It's an absolutely terrific buzzer. I've had great success with this on Gratham and Hanningfield, as I said, under the bung, and it's really worth having a few of these in your box. I hope you enjoyed the tying. Do share it, give it a thumbs up, and if you're not a subscriber, hit that bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.